Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I'm Kyle Benton, 37, operations lead for a logistics company just outside Denver. It was a Wednesday evening, sometime after 7, and I had just peeled off my work shirt, swapped into jeans, and started rinsing rice for dinner. My hands were still wet when she walked through the door with a paper bag from some boutique shop and a look that could only be described as elevated, not joyful. I asked if she wanted to eat in or out. She shrugged while checking her phone, already halfway to the stairs. I mentioned the jazz night I'd booked for Friday, an old band she used to play in the car when we were still dating. Also reserved dinner at Café Delancey, the same place she'd raved about 2 years ago after they updated their menu. Figured I'd blend something nostalgic with something new. That used to mean something. She paused on the bottom step, looked at the envelope in my hand, and laughed, just a dry chuckle through her nose. "This feels like pathetic high school stuff," she said, not even bothering to unwrap the sarcasm. My grip on the envelope tightened, but my face stayed even. She disappeared upstairs before I had a chance to say anything back. I let the rice overboil and had to start again. For the next hour, the house felt too large for 2 people. She didn't return downstairs. No music or movement. When she finally came down to grab a water, she walked past the dining table without a glance. No comment about the candles, or the table settings, or the wine chilling next to her favorite stemless glasses. That kind of silence carries its own weight. You don't need to yell to deliver a message. When she first signed up for that weekend retreat, some empowerment thing hosted at a scenic cabin outside Boulder, I supported it. She'd seemed burned out, distant. I thought maybe unplugging and breathing mountain air would bring her back lighter. In a way, it did. Just not to me. Since she returned, her tone shifted like she'd downloaded a new vocabulary. Words like container, space, alignment. Every sentence about our marriage started with, "I feel like," or "what I've realized." I gave her room to speak. I gave her time to process. But nothing about her reentry felt connected to the life we'd built together. Books started stacking up beside the bed. Titles about feminine sovereignty and masculine deconstruction. Podcasts played through the Bluetooth speaker while she folded laundry, if she folded it at all. I stopped trying to share weekend plans or weekday errands. Her responses weren't hostile, just detached, like her mind floated elsewhere, evaluating life as a concept, not as something lived beside someone. That Friday morning, I passed her in the hallway. I mentioned her sister's birthday dinner coming up. She blinked, then said she might not go. Group energy's been heavy lately. Might be a good time to detox socially. That was her blood. Her niece was flying in from college for the first time in a year. "Do whatever you need," I replied. She nodded, then turned away, tapping a voice note into her phone. I started paying attention to smaller moments. The way she flinched slightly when I reached to tuck her hair behind her ear, or how she left her wedding ring on the dresser more days than not. Once, I mentioned how the garage door opener needed replacing. She responded by asking if I'd ever considered how traditional male-female roles limit intimacy. I wasn't sure what to say to that. Sunday evening, she curled up on the far edge of the couch, scrolling through messages while I folded laundry solo. I asked how the yoga session went earlier that day. She said, "Intense. We did inner child visualizations. I cried for a 7-year-old version of me that stopped being heard." I said I was glad it was meaningful for her. She didn't ask how my day was. When I asked if she wanted to watch the documentary we'd talked about last week, she looked up and said, "I don't want to consume anything heavy right now. My nervous system can't handle more external input." That's when it really hit me. I was occupying a version of her past life that she had apparently outgrown. The following night, I was chopping onions when I found an old Polaroid stuck to the fridge, us at Red Rocks, faces sunburnt, holding up giant lemonades. Her smile then was all teeth and trust. She wore that black tank top with the torn neckline and had leaned into my shoulder like we'd just invented gravity. I looked toward the living room. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor with incense burning and a velvet journal in her lap. Eyes closed, mouth slightly open in some silent mantra. I didn't say anything. Around midnight, I woke up alone in bed. Her side of the mattress hadn't even been turned down. I patted down the hall and found her asleep in the guest room, earbuds in, a silk sleep mask half slipped off her forehead. On the dresser, another book. Wife as a Concept, Rewriting the Role. The next morning, I found her already dressed, sipping ginger tea and scrolling her calendar app. "You good?" I asked. "Yeah, just mapping my energy output for the week," she replied. That moment, right there, somewhere between spiritual efficiency and emotional detachment, was when I realized I was no longer living with my wife. I was living with someone who'd decided to become her own project, and I'd been relegated to background scenery, something to be bypassed or studied. It didn't happen in a single outburst. The shift came slow, like someone tightening a screw half a turn every day. By the time you notice the pressure, it's already well past the thread. The woman I used to wake up beside had been replaced by someone fluent in terminology I hadn't signed up for. And if you questioned it, even gently, you became the embodiment of what she was trying to heal from. It started with tone. Familiar routines turned foreign. She'd once asked me to help with dinner prep. Now, the request came with a disclaimer about unpaid emotional labor. When I replied, "Sure, just let me finish this email," she exhaled loud enough to shake the room. "It's fine. I'll do it." Like I always do. Except she hadn't actually cooked in weeks. She'd begun using phrases that sounded like excerpts from a wellness conference. "I'm in a space of self-definition. My body's boundaries have changed. I need to be sovereign within shared time." I tried engaging, asking for clarification, offering thoughtful replies. But even curiosity felt framed as intrusion. Questions equaled control. Statements became assaults. Opinions were filtered through suspicion. She accused me of microaggressions I hadn't even known existed. Suggesting a movie? "You're trying to steer my downtime." Asking if she wanted to join me on a walk. "You're centering your preferences again." I started speaking less. Measured silence was safer. But silence, too, was recast as disengagement. One evening, I asked how she was feeling. A neutral question, no agenda. She narrowed her eyes and said, "Are you trying to manage my emotional narrative?" I blinked, unsure if I should laugh or apologize. She returned to journaling. The physical distance grew too. She'd walk around the house with her earbuds in, even during shared meals. Her phone screen glowed brighter than our dinner conversations. At first, I assumed she was busy or distracted. But I began catching fragments, voice memos, video calls with women I'd never met. "He wants me in a box he can understand. We're living out archetypes, and I'm trying to dissolve mine." I wasn't angry, just stunned. That Sunday, I came home with groceries. She was on the living room floor, surrounded by crystals and essential oils, a book titled The Marriage Detox open beside her. She looked up, then down again, as if I'd walked into the wrong retreat. I set the bags down, hoping she might ask what I got, maybe suggest we cook together. Instead, she picked up her phone and tapped away. When I asked if she wanted to eat now or later, she replied, "You're interrupting my self-regulation window." The edge in her voice wasn't sharp, it was polished, practiced, like she'd rehearsed the phrasing to sound enlightened while dismissing me with surgical precision. Later that night, I found our bathroom mirror fogged from her shower. In the center, someone had drawn a heart in the steam with a single word inside, "Me." I stood there staring at it, toothbrush in hand, unsure if it was meant to be empowering or if it was just a final stamp over everything we'd once shared. By midweek, even our arguments lost structure. They weren't loud or chaotic, just quiet monologues, delivered like sermons. I'd sit on the couch while she stood, one hand gripping a mug, the other gesturing toward concepts I couldn't pin down. "You create a power imbalance with your presence," she said during one of them. "Your stability feels oppressive." I nodded, unsure how to shrink safely. Then came the comparisons. The retreat leader had a partner who gave her full autonomy with intimate connection. A podcast guest described her husband as a divine masculine channel who supports without asking. And I was the old frame she was outgrowing. The structure she once needed for survival, but now saw as confinement. She'd sit on the patio some evenings, barefoot and sipping turmeric tea, staring at the skyline like it whispered answers. I'd join her in silence, waiting for some thread to pull us back into each other's orbit. But whenever I tried to speak, she raised a finger without looking. "Just being," she'd say, as if my voice contaminated the air. One Friday, we got invited to her cousin's wedding in Phoenix. I asked if she wanted to book tickets. She paused, then replied, "I might go solo. I want to feel myself unmirrored." It took me a few seconds to process the sentence. Longer to realize she wasn't joking. That weekend, her tone sharpened further. She said I carried a caretaker complex, and that my kindness had become a leash. I reminded her of the anniversary trip I'd planned, thinking it might bridge the divide. Her response? You keep trying to earn intimacy with gestures. That's coercive. I stood at the kitchen counter while she poured herself oat milk, that phrase looping in my head like a warning. Monday morning, I opened the hall closet and found she'd moved some of her things into a suitcase. She hadn't mentioned a trip. I didn't ask. She spent more time at her co-working space downtown, coming home later than usual, smelling of sage and citrus. She once walked in mid-laugh, still wearing headphones, and brushed past me as if I were a shadow. The next day, I made a casual comment about how disconnected we felt lately. Her reply came fast, rehearsed. I'm reclaiming myself. That might look like distance to someone used to access. That word, access, hit differently. She was speaking like I was trying to unlock something without permission, when all I wanted was eye contact during dinner. She left early the next morning for another group session. She called it circle work. No details. By that point, I knew what was coming. She wasn't building a better version of us. She was building an exit, and she wanted to see if I'd just sit and watch it happen. Sunday morning arrived with that hollow quiet that only shows up when something's already been decided, even if it hasn't been said. The house felt suspended in air, coffee brewing, birds outside the window, her bare feet padding across hardwood like any other weekend. But it wasn't. At least, not for me. She was standing in front of the open fridge when I placed the envelope on the kitchen table. Cream cardstock. Unlabeled. I watched her glance at it and returned to slicing avocado, as if it were just another bill or coupon. I poured 2 cups of coffee, habit, muscle memory, and sat across from her without a word. Eventually, curiosity overrode apathy. She wiped her fingers, picked up the envelope, and pulled out the single page inside. Just 2 lines. You have 72 hours to decide what this marriage means to you. Full return or full release. Your timeline, your choice. She looked up, searching my face for a crack. I kept sipping. Calm wasn't a performance. It was the truth. I had run out of justifications for someone else's confusion. She blinked slowly, then set it down like it was radioactive. You're giving me an ultimatum? Deadline, I said. You've spent weeks treating this as a solo process. I'm simply adding structure. Her mouth opened. Something about the stillness unnerved her. No raised voice. She walked away without finishing her breakfast. Day 1, she stayed busy. Vacuumed the guest room. Rearranged some books. Lit incense in the hallway and opened all the windows, as if cleansing the space might change the question. We crossed paths in the kitchen twice. Once, she asked where I put the olive oil. Later, she left a post-it by the sink. We're low on ginger. Her usual phone conversations with the circle were absent that day. Instead, she spent time in the backyard, journal in lap, thumb tapping the pen cap like she was stuck between 2 answers and hated both. I didn't follow. I made a grocery run, repaired a leaky shower head, read an article about tire rotations. Everything normal, except the energy had shifted. Finally, it wasn't mine alone to carry. That evening, she passed by my office doorway, lingered half a second longer than needed, then kept walking. Day 2, she came down wearing a top I hadn't seen in months. Something I'd bought her on a trip to Austin. Subtle olive green, her color. She made French press instead of herbal tea, set 2 mugs down, and offered a small smile. I returned it. Politely. Not falsely. I've been thinking, she said. Good. She waited, expecting a question. None came. That's the moment it started to register. The attention economy had changed. She was used to me reaching. Now I was rooted. She tried conversation during lunch. Asked about work. I gave brief answers. Clear but unrevealing. She fidgeted with her sleeve. That afternoon, she pulled out old albums, wedding photos, road trips, even the Christmas card from year 3 that featured her parents. I watched from the hallway as she flipped through them. She didn't notice me there. Day 3, she stayed home from her co-working space. Told her team she needed integration time. Dressed comfortably but presentably. No self-help book in sight. She was in the kitchen early, arranging breakfast for 2. We ate in silence, punctuated by utensils. Then, midway through her second bite, she said it. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible. I didn't answer immediately. Let the air hold her words where they could echo. I thought I was evolving, she continued. But maybe I was escaping. Maybe, I said. She looked down. You didn't deserve that. That's true. Another long pause. I thought you'd chase me. I thought I could push as far as I wanted, and you'd just wait. I set down my fork. That's been your pattern. Unspoken rules. I provide effort. You measure it against your shifting criteria. Then when I stop, you call it abandonment. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. You still have until tonight, I said, standing. Use it well. She didn't follow me out of the room. Later that evening, around 7 o'clock, I found her sitting on the couch, that envelope in her hand again. The paper was folded, edges worn from revisiting. I want to stay, she said. Not just physically. I mean actually show up. I didn't nod. I'm not saying it'll be perfect, but I want to relearn us. With both of us in the room. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Words are easy. I know. Return means no more lab experiments. No more treating me like a mirror for your theories. It means actual partnership. She straightened up. Then that's what I'm choosing. Still, I didn't move toward her. The timer had gone off, and she had answered. But now came the longer task, proving that choice wasn't just a response to discomfort. I left the room to finish cleaning the garage. That night, she reached for me under the covers, tentative and slow. I let her fingers rest on my chest for a moment. Then I turned out the light. The morning after her declaration, I woke early and made coffee like always. She came down 20 minutes later, dressed with intention, hair pulled back, light makeup, a blouse I hadn't seen since the retreat. She hovered near the kitchen island, waiting for eye contact that didn't arrive. I placed her mug on the counter and walked to the garage to retrieve my toolbox. A broken drawer upstairs needed fixing. That seemed like the right priority. She lingered in the hallway as I passed, hesitant to interrupt. Eventually, she spoke. Do you want to talk? I tightened a screw on the drawer slide. About what? About yesterday. You already made your choice. I'm watching now. That ended the exchange. Over the next week, she switched strategies. Instead of lectures or distance, she tried nostalgia. Old playlists filled the living room. Her laughter sounded practiced, timed to moments she thought might revive something. She made my favorite lemon chicken, overcooked it slightly, but the effort sat on the plate like a peace offering. I ate in silence. When she asked how it was, I said, solid attempt. She smiled, but the corners wavered. Then came the third-party messages. Her sister texted me out of nowhere. Hey, I heard you guys have been going through stuff. She's been talking a lot. Says she misses how things used to be. I thanked her for the message. Said we were handling things. No details. Next came a coworker of hers, someone I'd only met once at a dinner party. He messaged through LinkedIn. Of all places, something vague about hoping both sides find understanding. It was clear she'd been sharing the situation with people outside the circle of our marriage. I responded with a single sentence. I don't believe our private life requires outside narration. That weekend, I returned to the same jazz bar where I'd booked the failed date weeks prior. Alone, I ordered a whiskey and listened to 2 sets without touching my phone. She called midway through the second set, once, then again. I silenced both. Back home, she asked why I'd gone out solo. I said I needed rhythm more than explanation. Her face crumpled slightly, but she recovered quickly. I'm trying. Trying is measured by impact, I replied, not effort. She spent that night in the guest room. The next morning, she apologized for sharing our problems with others. I thought I needed support. You needed control of the narrative, I replied. Support would have looked like honesty between us. She nodded. Nothing else. I noticed smaller shifts in her routines. Fewer calls with her empowerment group. The journals remained closed on the shelf. She unsubscribed from one of the podcasts she once played daily. But none of it felt conclusive. It felt like someone pausing a program, not deleting it. One evening, she asked if I wanted to watch that documentary we'd postponed. I said sure and sat beside her. She kept glancing over, waiting for my hand to reach for hers. I didn't move. She folded her hands in her lap. Halfway through, she whispered, "This is lonely." I muted the screen. Which part? Being here without you. I looked straight ahead. Then you understand the last 2 months. She sat quietly, eyes glossy. For once, there were no slogans, no catchphrases from some digital sermon. That week, a neighbor stopped by with his dog. We made small talk about repairs, weather, yard work. After he left, she said, he asked if we're okay. Everyone's asking. They're noticing. They always notice eventually. The reality had reached her. This wasn't just introspection anymore. It had become visible. The facade she tried to wear now had visible seams. She baked banana bread the following morning, played our old favorite record while folding laundry, left a sticky note on the bathroom mirror that said, "Today, I'm listening." I brushed my teeth, read the note, and moved it to the medicine cabinet. That night, she cried for the first time in weeks. Quiet tears while we were brushing up against each other in bed, close, but not touching. She reached for me under the blanket. I let her hand stay on my arm, unmoving. "I miss what we had," she whispered. "You tested what we had," I replied. "I didn't think I'd lose it. You assumed the supply was endless." She didn't answer. The next morning, she asked if we could schedule counseling. I said I'd think about it. Truth was, I already had. But I wanted her to feel what earned trust looked like. Deliberate, slow, built brick by brick. The truth no longer frightened her. The performance had exhausted its run. And the applause she once expected, through pity, persuasion, manipulation, had stopped coming. Now, only the truth remained. She woke before sunrise the next day, brewed a pot of dark roast, and waited for me at the kitchen table, same spot where I had once left the ultimatum envelope. Her hands were folded. Her eyes, for once, carried none of that glazed detachment I'd grown used to. They held focus. "I'd like to restart," she said quietly. I stirred honey into my cup. The spoon circled slowly. "Restart what?" "This. Us. I know I can't erase anything. But I want to learn the shape of this marriage again, with your terms included." I leaned back in my chair. "My terms haven't changed. They were always on the table. You just stopped reading them." She nodded once. She'd stopped asking for quick fixes. Her rhythm had changed, slower now, more grounded. She returned to basic routines. Grocery lists on the fridge. Sunday laundry is folded. A real meal on the table twice that week. No flair, just consistency. The house began feeling like a shared space again. One evening, I found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting old mail. She looked up. "I'm deleting the retreat group chat." I nodded once, poured myself water, and went back to reviewing reports for work. That was the new pattern, no applause for basic decency. Later that week, she asked if I would consider counseling again. This time, she didn't frame it as processing collective shadows or realigning intimacy energetics. She simply said, "I'd like to understand how we drifted and how to prevent it again." I agreed to 3 sessions. At the first one, she spoke honestly, even when the truth painted her in a selfish light. Said she got intoxicated by the idea of independence and confused it with superiority. Thought detaching meant healing, when really it meant hiding. The counselor asked what changed her mind. She replied, "Watching the man I once dismissed carry himself with quiet dignity. He never punished me. He simply stopped waiting." The therapist glanced my way, expression unreadable. 3 sessions turned to 6. Each one peeled back another layer. There were no grand revelations, just realignment. Eye contact. She started making decisions with me, not around me. We restructured our finances together, revisited shared goals, travel, savings, extended family plans. She initiated physical closeness again, but didn't rush when I took time to respond. The space between us wasn't cold anymore. It was earned. At her request, we set up a monthly check-in night. No distractions. The first one was awkward. By the third, it felt necessary. Somewhere between shared stories and unresolved details, a new rhythm emerged. Still, I kept a mental scoreboard. Trust, once broken, doesn't return with sentiment. It rebuilds with repetition. There were moments she slipped, an old tone, a defensive phrase, but she caught herself quickly. And when she did, she paused, corrected, and moved forward without drama. Our intimacy returned. Slowly, she stopped framing it as spiritual detachment or unnecessary weight. One night, she simply reached for me and said, "I miss this." And when it happened, it wasn't forced. It was familiar, safe, voluntary from both sides. She began visiting her sister again, volunteered to host her niece's graduation dinner. Her world re-expanded. She wanted to be part of something again, together. Still, I had one rule, one she knew was immovable. The moment respect eroded again, I would walk. No more negotiations, no prolonged confusion. One breach, and it ends. That line had been drawn in permanent ink. She accepted it, the kind of understanding that only arrives after consequence. Some weeks later, we sat in the backyard watching dusk settle across the neighborhood. She turned to me, eyes soft. "Thank you for not trying to fix me." "I wasn't trying to fix anyone," I replied. "I was deciding if I could still stay." She nodded. The silence between us no longer waited with avoidance. It felt restful. That night, I pulled her close. She responded fully.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.